being recorded. There we go. Go ahead.
Cool. So again, my name is Michael. Thanks for joining us tonight online with the Philadelphia Orchard Project. And if you're not familiar with us, we're a nonprofit in Philadelphia that designs, helps to plant and coach folks on orcharding and perennial agriculture in Philadelphia in partnership with community groups all across the city. And we also do public education and gleaning or wild harvesting activities. Like today, we picked lemons together at Historic Strawberry Mansion. And we do other events throughout the year where we highlight lesser known available foods around us, like mulberries and crab apples and June berries. Sometimes the nuts that are available as well. And then to expand that sort of public programming, we've cultivated this workshop series where we partner with teachers like Kelly, who's joining us tonight, to help teach topics of different methods of utilizing these things, which are just available in the environment around us, like these trifoliate oranges that you see in a variety of landscapes in Philadelphia and the area. It's a hardy citrus tree that's the only citrus tree that grows this far north without bringing it inside over the winter. So that's pretty amazing to have citrus available in this climate. It's originally from northern China and the Korean Peninsula, and it's kind of evergreen, or at least its twigs remain green throughout the year. Has these beautiful, abundant lemons, and it's very productive every year. So it doesn't have that alternate bearing tendency of a lot of fruit trees, which is nice, pretty reliable. It's also called hardy orange or flying dragon. Some people call it bitter lemon because there's a slight bitter tinge to it. It's like there's very citrusy, but then there's a slight flavor that I don't really know how to describe. But yeah, it's traditionally used in jams, jellies, or candied or turned into marmalades, but you can also use it as a substitute for lemon in anything. I just had some tea this morning with it, squeeze into it an herbal tea that I make from tulsi, lemongrass, anise hyssop, and lime basil. Blends really well with it. You can use it in fire cider like we're going to do tonight, and you can also turn it into a vinegar, which I hear it makes a nice vinegar, which I haven't quite perfected yet, but I'd really like to. And so that's just a little bit about the shrub. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat and I can try to answer them as we go along. But it's really lovely to have you all here tonight and to have Kelly and see you again through the computer. It's been a few years. But yeah, thanks so much. And I'm just going to hand it over to Kelly to teach us how to make fire cider.
Cool, thank you. Well, yeah, making fire cider is very simple and one of my favorite kind of fall things to do. But just a quick introduction of me. My name, I know of some of you, but my name is Kelly McCarthy. I'm an herbalist in Philadelphia. I have a business called Attic Apothecary through which I see clients. So I meet with people one-on-one for herbal consultations, and I also teach a lot of classes. So I teach at Bartram's Garden a bunch. In the pandemic, I've been doing more online stuff. So here we are online tonight. Yeah, tonight we'll be talking a little bit about some of the, well, first we'll just go over the basic method for making fire cider. And then while y'all are like chopping and kind of prepping the fire cider, I'm going to talk more in detail about the ingredients that we're likely using and some of their medicinal properties. And then feel free to pop in with like, hey, does this look okay? Or is this chopped enough? Or how's the ratios here? I'm happy to answer those questions, and you can just come off mute if, or type in the chat, whichever. And then towards the end, we'll like all make sure that we feel confident about like, cool, this is my brew is set and it's going, and kind of what to do with, what's the next steps after this little video was over. So the method for making fire cider is very, very simple. You basically chop everything up, put it in a jar, cover it with vinegar, and then add a big scoop of honey to that. You let that sit for a couple of weeks, and then you strain all of the kind of like plant parts out. And what you're left with is what's called an oxymel. So an oxymel is a fancy herbal word for something that is has a basis of vinegar and honey. So an oxymel, like tea has a basis of water, an oxymel has a basis of vinegar and honey. So we're making tonight an oxymel, and we're actually making what I would consider like a warming oxymel, because so many of the herbs that we're using are like warming up to our body. So some of the ingredients that you might have on hand, I'll show you what I have, and then you can just like, feel free to chime in with like, what about this or this? But oops, I forgot my garlic in the kitchen, but I always have a white onion. I always have some ginger, which I actually grated my ginger up already. So that's just the tip of my ginger. I put in a bunch of turmeric this year, which is new. I don't always do that. Then I have this big pile of, in here this year, I have some rosemary, some thyme, sage, and oregano, trifoliate orange, or a lemon works. I've also been curious to experiment with other citrus like grapefruit or limes. One note about citrus is when I chop mine up, I just chop up the whole peel and everything, the peel, the seeds, the pulp, the juice, all of it goes in. So I try to get something organic if I'm going to get it at the store, just because like a non-organic citrus peels tend to have more pesticides. They're like a high pesticide fruit, I think. And then I'm gonna go get some garlic from the kitchen, but I'll usually put like a whole head of garlic in. And then hopefully that will all fit in a jar that's like this size. We'll see. I also brought a giant jar if I need to. And then some apple cider vinegar. And you see my quantities. I just have like giant versions of everything. And this is a lot of honey. So yeah, I think some other things that are in my kitchen right now that I have put in before and that like you could experiment with are black peppercorns are really nice, cayenne peppers, any kind of hot peppers, jalapenos, ghost peppers, anything that's real spicy. You could also just put like, powdered cayenne works as well. And you can also go like a slightly different like palette route and do things like cinnamon stick, cardamom, coriander, cumin. I just tend to grow, I have like the sage, rosemary kind of stuff out in my garden. So that tends to be where I go. But if you don't have a garden or if you're just kind of, want to experiment with something new, you could go this other route, and we'll talk more about those plants, but they all have similar like antiviral, antibacterial kind of properties. So I'll just pause there for a second and see if people have questions about like getting started with chopping.
Do you chop everything up really finely, or is it kind of like bulky?
Yeah, great question. I think it's nice to do stuff pretty fine, because the idea is that you're having the smaller stuff is chopped, the more surface area is available to the vinegar and the honey to really extract it. So if you like chop it super, super fine, you're going to have probably a more potent blend than if you do just huge chunks of stuff. I think there's a fine line, like, you know, we don't need to like make everything into a tiny paste. Although another possible way of doing it is like just cutting large chunks, throwing everything in the blender and just like turning on the blender a few times and letting stuff really just get like turned into pulp. My blender just broke, but honestly, that's one of the simplest ways to do it. And then you save yourself a bunch of chopping. But this year I'm doing a bunch of chopping. But yeah, other questions about like the prep? And also, like, if questions come up as we're going along, like I said, feel free to just, hey.
Does it matter the I would guess the plant material versus vinegar ratio?
Yeah, so that I think we'll come to that once we are like further along. And I think what usually ends up happening is I have a jar and it gets filled up to like most of the way full with plant material. And that's a kind of as I put stuff in there loosely. So it's not me like squishing everything down super tight. It's just kind of like throwing it in. And then I'll pour vinegar over so that it's about like a half an inch or so over the top of the material. So I don't end up weighing or measuring anything. It's very like just kitchen folk medicine kind of stuff. But the ratio is like you need to have enough vinegar, enough extra vinegar and enough room that when you strain away the plant material, there's like liquid to be strained off. But if you don't have enough plant material in the vinegar and honey kind of macerating, it just won't be very strong. So the ratio is kind of like, it should be packed full, but you don't need to like squish everything. And then as far as ratios with all the other ingredients to each other, like I said, I don't measure it. So it's kind of like 1 onion, 1 head of garlic, a handful of herbs, some ginger, like a few inches, you know, usually I'll do like 2 or 3 inches of ginger. I don't like stuff very spicy. So I only do like maybe 1 hot pepper, maybe no hot peppers, and just do like kind of horseradish instead. But you can do like a lot of hot peppers if you like spicy stuff. And it's something that you'll be taking in low doses. So even if it is really spicy, like you don't have to, it's not like you're having a lot of it at a time. It's a kind of remedy that you have in like teaspoons. So, yeah.
I have a quick question. So I had harvested from my tree mostly last week, and then I put it in the refrigerator. So some of them are kind of soft and brown. Are those still okay to use?
Yeah, I think, you know, you can use your judgment. Like, I think you don't want something that's rotten. The vinegar honey does act as a preservative, but it's not a super strong preservative. So I might like err on the side of like, you can, if you put those like really kind of brown and soft ones in, I would just strain them out sooner, like strain it out next week instead of letting it sit for a month. Yeah, does that make sense? Okay. Did you have a question too, Kate?
Yeah, I didn't have any horseradish at the store, so then I was thinking, I picked up a daikon. I was wondering, like,
Yeah,
throw it in there.
Yep, totally.
Okay.
That would be awesome. Yeah, and I think it's like, I'll let you guys start chopping and I'll just talk a little bit about some of the plants. So, what we're going for, the kind of general idea for fire cider plants are that these plants are going to warm up our body. It's a really simple concept. When we get cold, our immune system has to work harder and we're more susceptible to illness. It's also like one of the reasons that people tend to get more sick in the winter. There's lots of reasons, but one of them is that the bacteria and viruses live better in colder. Like there's this kind of like sweet spot where when the air is a little bit cold, they're more active and kind of like out and about. So in general, being warm, staying warm, warming up our bodies is a lot of what we're going for. One of the reasons that when we get sick, we have a fever is one of the primary ways that our body fights infections. So when a pathogen comes into our body, one of the immune responses is to reset our temperature a little bit higher. So when a pathogen comes in, our body's like, oh shoot, there's like a virus inside. And in order to kill that virus, the temperature needs to go up to 103 to kill it. And so our body temperature just gets set a little bit higher and we get a fever, and then we feel cold because all of a sudden it's like 97 degrees is not warm enough for us anymore. And then then you have a fever and eventually you're hot and cold and hot and cold. And when you break a fever, your pores open up and you cool off and you kind of sweat all of the like immune buildup toxin stuff out of your body. So one of the ways that we can assist our immune system in the winter is just by taking warming herbs. To help keep kind of our internal thermometer and our internal vitality just up a little bit higher. So I want to start with talking about onion. So onion is like, if you eat just like a bite of white onion, like that is hot. It's a little bit burning in your mouth. That burning, there's burning from onions and garlic and horseradish. That is all a burning from these sulfur compounds. And those sulfur compounds are awesome for our immune system. They help to clear out the respiratory system and the sinuses. They help to clear catarrh or mucus out from the lungs. So onions and honey is like a very classic kind of like cough remedy. Soaking onions in honey. Onions are also full of antioxidants, and antioxidants they basically help take like waste materials out of our body. Our body just makes waste materials from being alive, breathing, and like all the kinds of like moving our muscles around and stuff. So onions just help with that kind of like detoxification process in general. So having onions on a regular basis is very good for our immune system. It's very good for our digestive system. Yeah, they're just like a simple thing that we really take for granted. And that's in like, hopefully we're getting at least a little bit of onion every day in our food. Garlic, I mean, is it the most amazing kitchen remedy? Maybe, possibly. Garlic is incredibly antibacterial and antiviral. So garlic, especially when eaten raw, or in the case of the fire cider, it's not quite raw, but it's not roasted, it's not fried, it's not cooked. That kind of garlic, the compounds, those sulfur compounds in the garlic are just so helpful, especially for scavenging the stuff in the mucous membranes up into our nose, our sinus cavities, our mouth. So yeah, if I'm like starting to get sick, at the first sign of being sick, if I'm like traveling or I'm not home, I'm not near an apothecary and I don't have access to my other teas and whatnot, you can usually find garlic around. And so just like nibbling on a little bit of raw garlic, it's very intense, but it can be helpful to just stave off that kind of initial like, oh no, I'm starting to get sick. It's also, I mean, that burning can upset some people's stomach. So sometimes pairing garlic with a little bit of fat, like peanut butter or yogurt, can help it just go down a little bit easier if you're trying to have like some raw garlic because you're starting to get sick. But it can be, you can also just have garlic tea. If you've never had garlic tea when you're getting sick, it's like, it's really kind of pleasant. There's this way that you're like, I shouldn't like this, but because I'm a little bit sick, I actually do.
I was just thinking of peanut butter and garlic. I'm like, I don't know, but maybe if I'm sick, it won't even matter.
Totally. Well, you have to kind of go like the like peanut sauce like vibe in your mind, because just peanut butter and garlic is like what?
Yeah, it's like an interesting combination.
But it works because I think sometimes when you're getting sick, you're just like, I don't care. I just don't want to feel this way. So
I always like to think about it as I'm like showing the germs that I'm not scared, I'm like, listen, I'm loca.
like, I would even eat this, okay?
You don't want to mess with me.
Yeah. That's funny. So ginger and turmeric. Ginger and turmeric, like I said, this is my first time having turmeric in mine. Usually I just have ginger, but they are so nice and warming. I mean, you can just imagine like drinking some ginger tea or having ginger, like something, with a lot of ginger. To me, it almost like heats up the insides of my ears and my throat. It's like my whole face will turn red and I'm just like, whoo. Ginger is also, it's antimicrobial, so meaning it's antiviral, it's antibacterial. And it's also a diaphoretic. So it helps to open up your pores and actually move a fever along. So when you drink ginger tea, you're sort of supporting your body to do the thing that it already wants to do when you're starting to first get sick. And turmeric acts really similarly. Turmeric has a little bit more anti-inflammatory properties. And if you do want to put turmeric into your fire cider, turmeric really needs black pepper with it to be absorbed by the digestive system. So if you want the turmeric to be active in your body, you need to add it's just enough black pepper, like almost like you would just sprinkle onto food. So it doesn't have to be a lot, but that helps the turmeric pass through your small intestine and actually get absorbed, because otherwise the resins in the turmeric, your body's kind of like, I don't know about this. So the black pepper helps your body like take it in and actually get those anti-inflammatory properties. And it's interesting because a lot of traditional foods that have turmeric in them also have a little bit of black pepper in them as well.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Sometimes I make a tea. It's like I'll put like lemon, turmeric, ginger, and I'll like chop it up and put it in there and kind of like let it steep and everything. But in that case, should I add like pepper into the tea? Would that help?
Yeah, a tiny bit would probably help.
Okay.
It seems to be more important if you're actually taking the like chunks of turmeric and putting them in your mouth.
Okay.
More so than like a tea. So it might actually not even be so relevant in like our fire cider. But one of the things that I will say about fire cider is you can eat the like chunks of stuff that's in there. Like if it's nice to just have the liquid, the like fire cider on hand. But if you're like, oh no, I'm really getting sick, just like a spoonful of all the like plant parts, actually eat that as well. Yeah. So yeah, I'm going to talk about rosemary, thyme, sage, oregano, all kind of, I'm going to lump them all together because I think about them for the immune system. They do have some different specificities, but you can interchange them pretty well. So thyme specifically, actually, I said I wouldn't talk about them separately, but thyme is one of the most antiviral herbs that we know about, which is, we don't know specifically, does this help with like the novel COVID-19 virus? We don't know, but we do know that it has been helpful in like plagues, all over the world for thousands of years. It's one of humans' like oldest and most important antivirals. So thyme, there's lots of different kinds of thyme, and it grows in lots of different places. It tends to like a little bit warmer, although it can deal with some cold if it is near some like rocks, nice warm rocks. But the rosemary, sage, thyme, oregano, these spices are very warming. If you've never just like chewed on an oregano leaf, it's like, it like burns and numbs your mouth. It's different than garlic, but it's a similar like, ooh, ow, ow, ow. Is this okay? Is this happening? And that is what it's doing to your inside. So it's kind of this like just really, really warming us up. A lot of the kitchen remedy, like a lot of our kitchen cabinet spices are very antimicrobial, and part of why we have them in our food is because before people were using refrigerators to keep food longer, they were using antimicrobial herbs to keep food from rotting, because we had different food preservation methods. So people figured out like, oh, these certain herbs are actually, when we put these in our like meat and vegetables, then the food actually keeps a little bit longer. So we know now that some of the things that it's preventing from getting in our food is also like helping our immune system just kind of stay, like as soon as there's a pathogen in our body, if we can introduce a little bit of rosemary, ginger, sage, oregano, that will help to actually kill that pathogen, and then kill the pathogen and support our immune system to warm up and just kind of do the rest of its job. Vinegar is cool. Vinegar has a long history as just like a kind of preservative. So it's not a super strong preservative. It doesn't extend the shelf life for years and years, but it will extend shelf life of food for like a couple of months. I've had fire cider that's lasted for a couple of years without spoiling. I think because so many of the herbs in it are antimicrobial. But vinegar is also just supportive for the overall environment of our body. The vinegar promotes, the word is escaping me. Just saw lightning outside of my house when I got distracted, which is cool that there's a thunderstorm, but alkaline, there's the word. Vinegar supports an alkaline environment in the body, and generally the alkalinity and acidity of our body has to be in a very, very narrow range for us to like be alive. And when it is a kind of ranges towards the more acidic, we're more likely to be susceptible to illnesses. It's a very broad statement, but it's sort of like the general trend. And when we have a more alkaline environment, our body is a little bit more able to fight off pathogens. And even though vinegar is an acid, there's a conversion that happens where it, with our stomach acid, it creates a alkaline environment. So it helps just sort of the general alkalinity of our body. The lemon or trifoliate orange, whatever kind of citrus you have. Citrus is generally really high in vitamin C. And vitamin C is one of the, it's a kind of supportive short-term thing for our immune system. For people who have low immunity, it can be helpful to take a little bit of vitamin C every day in the fall and winter. It's best to get those vitamins from our food. Our body's a lot more likely to absorb it and use it when it comes from food than when it comes from a vitamin capsule. So just getting a little bit of citrus in the winter is really nice. And I think, to me, it's telling that a classic, oh no, I'm getting sick tea is ginger, lemon, honey, that is, it's just it's warming, it has vitamin C. And then we haven't talked about honey yet, but honey is also antimicrobial. So I'm just saying the same thing about all of these things in our fire cider, but that's kind of what we're making, is a big antimicrobial warming oxymel. Honey is antibacterial specifically, and honey is also demulcent. So things that are demulcent are soothing to our tissue. So when we have honey in our hot tea, or just take a spoonful of honey, it actually coats the back of our throat, and those mucous membranes that are oftentimes when we get sick, they're irritated, our throat hurts. So honey not only just soothes the symptom of ow, my throat hurts, but it actually helps when it heals that tissue. That also makes the tissue less susceptible to further infection. So it's kind of doing two things at once. So yeah, I'll pause again there because that was a lot of talking, and see if anyone has fire cider questions or questions about that. Yeah, Kate.
So how many of the trifoliate oranges would you say?
It depends how big of a jar you have, but probably 2.
Okay.
2 or 3. Yeah.
I'm at a question. I was gonna ask, could I incorporate cranberries into it?
Yeah, I love that idea. Oh my God.
And I was also gonna say, some of the ingredients that you listed for it was very interesting, that a lot of those ingredients are in thieves oil, which is also stuff. So I was just oh, that's an interesting kind of correlation.
Totally. Do you want to say more about thieves oil for people who might not know?
I'm not gonna lie, I don't know much about it, but I do know that it was an oil used before to kind of fight bacterias and fungi and other, I guess diseases or illnesses. It was kind of used back then as their way, a defense against some of those things. But you could also correct me.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I think it was specifically used during the plague in Europe, in the 1200s, that killed half the population or something. And the sort of story about it is that there was these 4 thieves who were going around robbing dead bodies, and they were never getting sick and they were never dying. And so when they got brought to court, I don't know how courts worked back then with the judge or whoever it was okay, how are you doing this? How are you not getting sick and dying? If you tell us what you're doing, then we'll let you go. And they were all right, here's our recipe. And it was basically it's kind of like fire cider. It's all of these antimicrobial herbs. There's rosemary, sage, oregano, thyme, cinnamon, citrus. I think orange is usually in it. There's a couple other things. So, and then there's different modern recipes of it, but yeah, it's cool that we are using the same thing literally 800 years later. on the internet in a weird internet portal.
I have a question. Would
Yeah.
you take the seeds out from the lemon? Because these trifoliate oranges are incredibly seedy.
You know, I am kind of lazy that way and I wouldn't. Also because a lot of times citrus seeds have like some cool antibacterial properties. I don't know specifically about trifoliate oranges, but the oils in the seeds are like tend to be really like kind of immune powerhouses. And because you're going to strain everything out, like once you start to use your fire cider, I would probably just put it all in. Like I would just chop up like the whole thing, peel, juice, everything.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Easy. Just make it easy on yourself. Yeah.
I have a
So
quick question.
yeah, go ahead.
This is how little I know about this tree that I live with.
Yeah.
Is this a lemon or is it one of the oranges for the trifoliates?
Michael?
I wish I could give you a straight answer. I don't really know the lemon tree family very well because we can't grow most of it here. But it is related to rue and like that whole family that birthed the citrus trees.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, what's a lemon and what's an orange? You know, like botanically, I'm like, I don't know what the like, I know what my perception of the difference is, but I've also like had oranges that are like inedible because they're so sour and they like look yellow on the outside. And I'm like, that isn't orange and it's not sweet, but it's like an orange. So I guess I'm guessing it would be like based on the blossom, and then there's common names that get confusing where it's like it gets called both a lemon and an orange, and so like what is it? I don't know. So we're all in your boat, Carrie.
Okay. That one out.
I'm really interested in that though, and I'd love to look at the family tree of the lemon, and maybe I'll just get back to you on that. I will warn you that the residue that it leaves is very sticky. So you're gonna want to wash your knives and your countertop right after this workshop.
Oh,
And one of the my hints from if you are working with a very sticky plant is a little bit of alcohol, like vodka, just like a tablespoon or something of alcohol will really clean off like that kind of citrus resin or whatever kind of resin.
if I'm using a blender, should I add some like
Liquid.
vinegar? Yeah, in here.
Yeah, if you're gonna do the blender thing, I would probably just glug a bunch of vinegar in and then mix it up. And then once it settles, you can see you'll want to cover the whole thing with a little bit of extra vinegar. So you
Okay.
can kind of just eyeball it. And if you want to hold it up on the screen, we can see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Here I go.
Okay. I love this, like making stuff together in the kitchen. It's like one of the silver linings of the pandemic. I'm also like making mine here while we work together.
So I didn't have a quart, so this is very
Yeah.
big, but I also have
Yeah.
a lot of them, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna have other ways to make things, and would love to hear any other recipes, or maybe if that could be shared in the group afterwards.
Yeah.
But I think so far this might be like 6 little ones. Is that like a good amount for this size?
You're gonna want to put a lot more stuff in. So if that's like garlic, I don't know if do you have other stuff?
Yeah, no, I just meant for the
Lemons.
for the
Yeah.
oranges. Yeah.
Oranges, lemons, whatever they are.
There's
Yeah,
6 of the oranges.
that looks
Is that a
good.
good amount for this size? And then with the other ingredients?
Yeah, I'm thinking about my quart jar. That's probably similar.
Okay.
like proportion wise. Yeah. So yeah, if you have, I'm gonna be pouring mine in just a minute. And then I can kind of show you the ratios, but if y'all have questions about what about this or that. Uh-oh. There's a note here, the blender woke up the baby, I'll be back. Whoops. I have some ginger. I grew ginger and turmeric this year, and so I think I'm gonna make, this is giving me an idea to make a fire cider that's like, I've never actually done one that's the more like cinnamon cardamom route, but I think I'll try one that's like ginger, turmeric, cinnamon, cardamom, honey, vinegar. I think that sounds really good because I just always do the same old recipe pretty much. But I'm gonna go grab a garlic from my kitchen. And also one thing I'm remembering about the garlic, if you want to leave the garlic skins on, you can, because you're going to strain it all out. So that can save you a bunch of time to just, you know, or like maybe, you know, you're not going to put it in like this, you're going to chop it up. But if you don't have to be worried about like, oh, a little bit of skin here and there. Same with the onion.
Save us some time on the labor, huh?
Yeah, right. I'm Virgo, I'm all about that like efficient, like what is the least amount of work for the maximum output. The other fun thing about making fire cider is your house just is going to smell like really wild for the next day, probably at least. Maybe I'll talk just for a few minutes about kind of how to use this and next steps. So there's a couple different ways to use fire cider. You can use it as a daily preventive and take like a teaspoon per day. And you can also use it more acutely if you're like, oh no, my lymph nodes are swollen, my throat's a little sore, whatever, you're starting to get sick. You can take it like a teaspoon every hour. So fire cider generally is very safe. Like all of the ingredients are literally food ingredients. So you can go with really high doses. And when you're starting to get sick, it is important to use high doses frequently. That's how you support the immune system. So it's not very useful to just take fire cider once if you're starting to get sick or twice that day. It's like you really have to take it like every hour. And keep taking it for a couple days because it's like there's that moment where you're like, oh, maybe I'm getting better, and you stop doing all your stuff, and then that's when you really get sick. So really just keep it up for a couple days. My other favorite way to use fire cider is as a salad dressing. So you can mix it with a little bit of olive oil and use it as a dressing, or even like a marinade for other kinds of food like meat or tofu or whatever. Yeah, I mean, once you strain it, you'll see it's like it's a really interesting tasting, like sweet, sour, kind of like, it's just a really flavorful thing. So, you know, I'm not like a chef or something, but I would imagine there's kind of like endless like food possibilities. I tend to just use it on salads. And then I am a kind of like savory cocktail person. So it's really nice, like in a Bloody Mary, or other like, yeah, it can also be like a nice, it can just help you make instant tea if you're getting sick and you're like, oh no, I have no energy. I need to do something. You can just do like hot water, a big splash of fire cider, and you're good. Sometimes the vinegar will upset people's stomach a little bit. So if it's helpful for you to take your fire cider with food or with water, you don't need to worry about like diluting it or something. I mean, it's fine if you dilute it, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, and as far as how long to let it sit, you can, that's kind of up to you. Like, you can taste it tomorrow and you're going to taste like, wow, this is already like tasting really good and fun. I think that a lot of people traditionally leave their fire cider sit for a full moon cycle. If you want to start using it next week, you can. There's a herbalist who I've studied with a little bit who she used to be a chemist, and she's like, there's really not much more that can get extracted after the first 72 hours. I know we have our tradition. I know we let everything sit for a month, but like chemically speaking, it's not doing much. I still let most of my stuff sit for a month, but if you want to start pouring some stuff off like within a few days, you can. And yeah, as far as like straining, there's a bunch of options. You can, if you have like a sieve and a strainer, you can just use that. Cheesecloth works well. Cheesecloth in a funnel works okay. You can also just like kind of like hold it back and pour it down. Yeah, questions about using it? Dosage, anything like that? And then it looks like Michael put a link here for images of the citrus family. So maybe that could, okay. So there's some further research for you, Carrie. How's everybody's, how far along are people? Like, I think an hour is usually not quite long enough to like learn it, make it, finish it. But I think the one thing I want to say in case we don't like, you're not done with all your stuff before we go, is it's important to use a little piece of plastic. Like I just have a little baggie. So putting a piece of plastic, you can also use a piece of wax paper right here. So once you pour your vinegar in and put a big scoop of honey in, that piece of plastic is just in case if you're using a metal lid, because the metal lid will interact with that vinegar and it starts to break down and it gets really, it makes a really horrible like sludge that you don't want to go into your fire cider. So just make sure to protect it a little bit with some plastic. And yeah, the honey, if you end up like, if when you end up straining yours out, it's still a little bit too sour, you can always add more honey afterwards. I like to make sure to add a bunch of honey when I'm steeping it first so that the honey gets infused with all of the good stuff, but you can always add a little bit of honey later. Yeah, and then there's also, Michael put in a info sheet from the POP about the Philly Orchard Project about the trifoliate orange.
I think you already shared this, but just to ask again, how much of the apple cider vinegar is going over the plant material? Is it just enough to cover it?
Yeah, it usually the plant, it's like, because we're using so much fresh plant material, you don't usually have to worry about the plants absorbing it. I like to do, you know, a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch kind of like beyond the top of the level of the plants, just to make sure I really have enough to cover all of the plant material so that it's submerged. And I just kind of eyeball it. Yeah, you want to leave room in the jar to make sure you can add honey yet. But yeah, just enough to cover really is kind of the quick and dirty.
Okay.
Are there any other questions with our last minute together? Cool.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Callie. I learned way more than I thought I was going to about all the different ingredients and their properties. So thank you so much. That was really informative.
Yeah, cool. Well, yeah, thanks everybody for coming. And yeah, my email is atticapothecary@gmail.com. I would love to hear what you're doing with your fire cider. And then it looks like Michael is putting a link. Is this like a feedback form? Okay, a survey.
Yeah. If folks wouldn't mind, we do have a survey for feedback on the workshop, which is the last link that I shared at the bottom there.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody for coming, and yeah, be in touch. I would love to hear about your fire cider stories.
Thank you both.